All right, everybody, welcome back to Endurance Sports University, the Triathlon Study Hall. This is episode number 6. It certainly doesn't seem like we've done 6 of these, but we have. These are a ton of fun. Today is August 11th. So, for those of you that don't know me, there's a few new people on the call. My name is Ryan Reel, USAT Level 2 coach, youth and junior certified coach, master's degree in exercise physiology and biomechanics from the University of Illinois, Chicago. Second master's degree in organic and biological chemistry from the same place. Was a USA Triathlon High Performance Team head coach and team director from 2011 to 2015. Was with Training Bible, was one of their elite coaches from 2013 to earlier this year, 2015, when I ultimately broke off on my own and founded Endurance Sports University. So formerly the coach of Ironman Arizona, 2013 and 14, and pretty much sums me up. So, for those of you that don't know, what is Endurance Sports University? International leader in triathlon education and coaching resources and services for athletes, self-coached athletes, and for coaches. So it's everything from personal coaching, the standard triathlon personal coaching, to membership program, which we just started a little bit ago, doing some really great things there, and then the coaching education part, whether it be business coaching or how to be a better coach. So membership program, I want to talk to you guys real briefly about that. Specifically engineered for self-coached athletes and athletes on a budget. Personal coaching, that can get expensive. It starts at $200 and goes up from there. The membership program, $49.99 every 4 weeks. It's very affordable and it gets you some really outstanding stuff. So it's going to include initial one-on-one consultation. So that's 30 to 45 minutes of really digging into you as an athlete, see what your goals are. And then from there, training plan of your choice, intermediate, advanced, beginner, Ironman, super sprint, whatever it is you want to do, it's delivered in 4-week blocks. Triathlon Study Hall call, which is the group coaching call. That's what we're on right now. And then the other really big one is the private Facebook group with weekly accountability, special announcements, etc. Also comes with weekly coaching tips and motivation, access to the member resources, which ultimately these Triathlon Study Hall calls will become only available to members of Endurance Sports University. Training Peaks account, special sponsor discounts, and much, much more. So for those of you that are interested, if there are any of you, it's a monthly commitment or a 4-week at a time commitment, actually, 30-day notice to cancel. $49.99 for 4 weeks. That's the basic price. If anybody wants to give it a shot for free, it's a 2-week trial. Just enter MPro-2-weeks in the shopping cart or the order form, and you'll be off and running with your 2-week free sample. So, all right, let's get into what we're doing this evening. Short presentation, 3 keys to swimming mechanics. I think everybody's going to really enjoy this one. For those of you that are on the call and attend the entire call, I will do my best to get you a copy of this. And then ultimately open it up for questions and answers. That can be anything you guys want. It can be swimming related with mechanics, or it can be anything else. It's just your guys' opportunity to get whatever questions you have answered. It's really normally going to end up giving us some great answers and some great conversation. So, all right, my thoughts on swimming. All right, so what I'm going to give you here are my thoughts and experiences based on a lot of time and a lot of years teaching, racing, learning the sport, learning the science, working with athletes, and understanding how athletes think and learn different things, right? So I've been doing this since 2007. I have the master's degree in the exercise physiology of biomechanics. Had the USA Triathlon High Performance Team head coach position, team director position. Generally a daily training environment, meaning working with athletes day to day, really developing them as athletes, and working with everybody from a first-time triathlete to a client of mine that was on the 2012 Olympic trial start line. All right, so they're my technical philosophies of swimming. Pretty sure that not everybody's going to agree. My goal is to give you guys some very simple concepts and some cues that's going to be able to keep you on track and basically try to get the most out of your swim stroke. So let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to go a little bit quickly, so if anybody has questions, just type them in there. I can come back to it once we get through. All right, so the first slide, right? Change the way you're thinking, right? Change the way you think of swimming. So there's all kinds of different swim classes and swim theories, total immersion seeming to be one of the more popular ones. And everybody has the general, hey, this is what we need to do while we're swimming, right? And the biggest things that I hear most of the time is, you got to have a big catch, you got to have a good pull, you got to have high elbows, you got to rotate, all that type of stuff, right? And that's the way everybody normally thinks of swimming. When we transition from swimming in a pool to swimming in open water, that's a very, very different environment that we're swimming in. So we need to change the way we're looking at swimming. If we look at this gentleman that is hopping in to start swimming some laps, I'm pretty sure everybody's drawn right there to the extra fuel source that's attached to him. But if we take a look, I would, based off the way people talk about swimming, this dude's golden. He's got high elbows. Look at those things. They're way up there. Big high elbow right here. He's going to have a huge catch, right? Does that mean he's going to swim well? No, it doesn't, right? So we need to change the way that we're looking at swimming. We need to change the way we're thinking about swimming, right? So let's get into that and see what we got. So the three main keys, aspects of swimming that I want to cover with you tonight: body position, pressure, and direction. It's those three things. If you can master that, you're going to be an awesome swimmer. But then again, if you can master a physics book, you'll be a physics professor. So swimming, a little easier than physics, but then again, we have some physics built into this. So, all right, body position. What is body position? All right, so it's your body's position in the water, usually relative to the surface of the water. Makes perfect sense, right? So posture in the water, just like when you're standing, when you're sitting, when you're riding a bicycle, when you're running, when you're walking, whatever it may be, your posture in the water is incredibly important. And I'm going to show you why here in a minute. The two big words or catchphrases that I want you to keep in mind from this: your body has to be stacked on top of itself, and your body has to be athletically taut while swimming, right? So what exactly does that mean? Let's take a look at some pictures, right? So this is my wife who volunteered to be my model for the day. If we take a look at stacked body position, right? If I bring a yellow line in here on the picture on the left, she's pretty stacked, right? Her forehead is above her eyes are above her nose is above her chin is above, the midline of her chest, straight down through the belly button, all the way down to the ground, right? So we would say this position she's standing in is stacked, right? All the parts of the body are stacked straight up and straight down. That's a huge thing with swimming. If we all of a sudden end up looking like the picture on the right, that's no longer stacked, right? We can see she's actively leaning to her right, our left as we're looking at it. We can see that's not stacked, right? So you can imagine if you're going to be swimming with a funky body position like the picture on the right, how much is that going to help you? How much is that going to take away from you, right? So if we take that stacked body position, if we take a look at a taut body position, right, the picture on the left, she's athletically taut. Her core is engaged, and she is actively standing in a rigid, good body posture position. Her core is engaged. The core right here, these abdominal muscles and everything that goes through the core, ties your shoulders, which contains the arm and the hand, and your hips together. That's a huge thing, right? If we take a look at the picture on the right, she doesn't have a taut body position. You can see her shoulders are slumped forward, her core isn't engaged, right? So which one of these looks like a more athletic position, right? The one on the left does, right? If we go back to look at this picture here, which one looks more athletic? The one on the left does, right? So we want a stacked body position. We want a taut body, athletically taut body while we're swimming, all right? So a couple more pictures bringing it together. Now we got her right arm up in the air like she's going to swim. If we take a look at the far left, those two pictures, that's not an athletically taut position. We look at the right, now her core is athletically taut. So let's take a look, right? Here on the picture on the far left, she's still stacked, but she just isn't engaging in the core, right? If we take a look at the next picture, again, not engaging in the core. But if we take a look at the two pictures on the right, here she's stacked and athletically engaged, athletically taut, and she's active, right? And how about if we take a look at this? Where is her hand relative to where her hand is in this other picture, right? She just simply stood in one spot and rotated around, right? You can see this body position, not only stacked, not only athletically taut, but it's a longer body position, right? You want to be long when you're swimming. If we take a look at the last line, we can see there again, she's stacked on top of herself and athletically taut. So that's the first thing about body position. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Make sure your body is in line, stacked on top of itself while you're swimming. Make sure your core is engaged. Pretty simple, right? So what else do we need to know about body position? All right, so when we get long, we will naturally have that roll or the rotation that everybody's talking about, right? So we want to be long, right? If we take a look at the picture over here on the right, that's Michael Phelps. Take a look how long his body position is right here. right? If we take a look at a stacked body position, is he stacked, right? Everything seems to be stacked right up on top of itself right there and there, right? Now his head's rotating to breathe, right? But is his body, if we said, you know, here's the midline of his chest running right between, down the midline of his chest, right through his belly button, right out the bottom, that's stacked. That's a stacked position, right? So that's very solid. If we take a look at athletically taught, we know that there's no way on God's green earth he wins gold medals unless he's athletically taught. So we can take that for what it is, but if you look at the picture, you can see his entire core is engaged, all right? So from there, what else are we looking at? We're wanting to look at a very active hand entry, right? And we're going to come back to this and we're going to talk about it a little more in a minute. All right, so what does body position look like? What should it feel like, right? It should look like you're on top of the water. It should feel like you're on top of the water. If your hips are dragging, you're creating an anchor. You're dragging it through the water. You want your upper body and your hips up on top of the water as best you can. That's what it should look like. That's what it should feel like, all right? So let me ask you guys this question. That boat right there, that thing looks pretty fast to me, right? Definitely a speedboat. You guys ever seen a really short little itty bitty speedboat? No, you haven't. These speedboats, they're ridiculously long. If you look at the cabin that guy has right there, ridiculously small. But if you look at how long that boat is, that thing is really long, really, really long, right? So what's the purpose of that? Why do we care, right? We want to be long and we want to be up on the surface of the water, right? So what's the relationship between the boat and the surface of the water, which we can extend to what's the relationship between your body position and the surface of the water, right? The first thing, we need to generate momentum while we're swimming, right? So in the boat example, he pushes the throttle, the engines go, that generates his momentum. You guys and gals, you hop in the water, you push off a wall, whatever it may be, you're starting to generate momentum. From there, we can start generating speed. Once we get up to speed, now we have that speed, we can maintain it, we can increase it, whatever we need to do. From there, lift, right? So that boat, not very much of it is in actual contact with the water, right? So the more momentum we have, the more speed we have. The more speed we have, the more lift up onto the surface for you as a swimmer. With that, less drag, right? So we could pretty much end it right there. There's a little more we're going to talk about, but this is swimming right here. Get on top of the water. Make sure your body is stacked on top of itself. Make sure it's athletically taut. And get up on the surface of the water. If you do that, your momentum is golden. It's going to be generating speed. It's going to get the lift, boop, right up onto the top of the water, less drag. Benefit for everybody, right? So from there, let's transition real quick to talk about the 3 phases of a swim stroke, because I want to get into this just a little bit more. All right, first phase is the recovery phase. That is from the moment your hand or your elbow exits the water back by your hip to come up out of the water and around to where it comes back in, right? So that's the recovery phase, right to the point where it's going to re-enter the water. From there, we have hand entry, right? So that's the hand entering in and getting extension. From there, the last part of it is the catch and pull, getting into a good catch position, big strong pull, driving yourself forward. All right, so those are the 3 phases of the swim stroke. Let's take a look at each of these and maybe come up with some mental cues and some little things for you guys to take home and use the next time you go out to the pool, and hopefully get you a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient. All right, so when we take a look at the recovery phase, the name is incredibly misleading, incredibly misleading. The recovery phase, this is not passive in any way, shape, or form. And those of you that have a very passive recovery phase, you're going to have a very passive hand entry, and you are giving up a tremendous amount of momentum, and that's going to cost you what? What was it before? Speed and lift and drag, right? It's all tied together. So your recovery phase, this is a very active thing. This is not, oh, hey, check it out. My arm's coming up over my head. Yep, it's landed in the water. All right, I'm getting extended. No, it's get the hand out of the water, get through the recovery phase, and into the hand entry, right? You look at the top swimmers that are around there in triathlon or swimming or open water swimming, whatever it is, these guys don't have passive recovery phases, right? So this goes a long way to stroke rate, right? So if we have a very slow recovery phase, we have a low stroke rate. If we have a very fast recovery phase, now we have a high stroke rate. And that also plays into reach, right? Is your hand, when your hand comes forward past your head and you're reaching out to enter the water, that's reach. Is your hand entering right by the side of your head, or is your hand reaching way out in front of you, right? Those are the 3 different things that we really need to keep in mind with the swim stroke, right? So the recovery phase, That's it. How does this tie into the hand entry, right? Hand entry is ultimately going to maximize the length of the stroke, right? If your hand entry is right by your head, you got an incredibly short swim stroke. If it's way out in front of you, now you're getting longer. You're maximizing the length of the stroke. It's going to set you up and help create extension, right? Now, hand entry, this is a very, very active moment. This is not, I'm going to gently lay my forearm and my hand down on the surface of the water, and I'm going to let it fall under as I rotate. That is a way to swim slow. Right? If you want to swim faster, the hand entry is almost like you're throwing your hand, almost like you're throwing a punch into the water ahead of you. All right, that's the mental cue that we really want to take away from that. All right, so the third part of this, catch and pull, which ultimately ties into pressure, which we're going to get to here in a minute. So we go through the recovery phase, we throw our hand, enter the water, get extended. The hand and the arm is going to come down into a good catch position, right? This is the over the barrel or the high elbow that we talked about at the very beginning when we were looking at that funny picture. All right, what we're going to be able to do, or what we're accomplishing with the catch, is we're setting a strong anchor. And what that's going to allow us to do is generate pressure in the direction that we want it to be generated, right? And we're going to get to that. I'm going to show you some cool pictures on that in a second. All right, so what's the entire purpose of the catch? Big, gigantic, strong anchor that's going to allow you to have pressure in the correct direction, which is the pull. All right, so that's the big thing with the catch and pull. All right, from there, let's talk a little bit more about the hand entry. Right, so throwing your hand forward like you're throwing a punch or a baseball or a softball or whatever it is, it's going to help you create momentum. Remember, momentum went to speed, speed went to lift, lift went to drag. Right, so do you want momentum? I certainly hope so. Right, and if you get out there in the middle of a race, an open water swim, there's no wall to push off of to get back up to speed. If you're going fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow because you have a real slow recovery phase or your hand entry is really slow, you are gaining and losing momentum, gaining momentum, losing momentum, gaining momentum, losing momentum. Does that sound like anything that anybody wants to do? No, I didn't think so, right? So that's the big deal with hand entry, right? So it's going to help with momentum, the speed, the lift, the drag, like we just said. There's all right, so throwing your hand, good strong entry is going to increase the momentum. It's going to help you pick up your speed. It's going to pop your body up onto the surface of the water, less drag. Pretty straightforward. All of this increases efficiency, right? For the most part, unless your goal is I want to qualify for Kona, I want to be on the podium, I want to win the race, whatever it may be. If you're in an Ironman, getting through the swim as quickly as you can and efficiently as you can. That's the key, right? So, believe we now have a double slide. Nope, here we go. Simple, a couple pictures, right? So this is a woman who was swimming. I believe this was down in Florida. So her arm, that right arm right here, this is up partway through the recovery phase, right? So what we're looking at is what is she going to do with this hand, right? Is she going to be very active and throw this down, landing somewhere out in this area? Or is she going to be very passive, right? And the picture that pulls out of it is her entire hand, forearm, and upper arm and elbow is sitting right there on the surface of the water, right? That is an incredibly passive hand entry. She's not throwing anything right there. And one of the big problems that this particular athlete faces is she has a pretty good catch and pull. It's actually really good, but she loses it going through the recovery phase and with the hand entry, right? So she spends a lot of time generating a lot of pressure and force in the right direction and speed, momentum, all that good stuff, but then gives it right away when she's coming back through the recovery phase. So that's kind of a graphical example for you right there. All right, so pressure, let's get on to this, right? So pressure is basically talking about the catch and the pull, right? And so one question is, why are you calling it pressure instead of catch, right? And the reason being, you're going to be feeling pressure from the moment that your arm starts to come down. And it's getting into, hey, get into a good catch position, right? That can mean something a little bit different to every single person, right? And it doesn't mean that they're all wrong. It means something a little bit different. So if I'm talking to two different athletes and I say, hey, you need to get into a better catch position, a little bit of a higher elbow. Athlete one might be like, yep, got it. Totally understand what you're talking about. Athlete number two might be like, okay, got it, need a higher elbow. And now they're going back to something like the big guy in the first picture we saw, right? So when we talk about pressure, we're now talking about what pressure are you feeling on the paddle, which is your hand, your lower arm, and your upper arm. What pressure are you feeling as you're bringing that into the catch position and then the pull, right? So the catch, where is the pressure going to start from? Soon as that hand starts to set the anchor that comes into the water, throw the hand entry, comes down, and we get into that over the barrel or catch position, as soon as it starts coming down, we're going to start feeling pressure, right? Because remember, that doesn't just drop down and we stop doing anything. Okay, now we're in a good position, fire, right? That's not what happens, right? So from the moment you're entering and that arm just starts descending into the water, you're starting to feel that pressure, right? So the goal, right? Why use the word pressure? It's a mental cue, right? If I tell you big catch, big pull, right? You better understand what that means, or else you're going to be doing something pretty funky, right? If I tell you pay attention to the pressure, pay attention to where the pressure's hitting you, right? You want to feel it fully on your palm, on your wrist, on your lower arm. Now you can feel that, right? And if you get to a point where I can only feel it on my hand, get a higher elbow, right? And now you can feel the pressure in addition to seeing what you're doing, right? So that's the goal with pressure. If we take a look at this graphic right here, this arm position is not fully into the catch. It's pretty close. I would say it need to come down maybe a little bit more right here. But as this arm and hand is coming down, this swimmer is feeling pressure right here as his arm is moving here into the catch position and then firing backwards for the pull, right? So this is the pressure that we're talking about right here. And it is felt through the entire swim stroke to that last moment when your fingers come up out of the water into the recovery phase, right? So that's what pressure is. All right, last one, direction, right? And this ties into pressure pretty well. Basically, it's not a phase of the swim stroke, but it's a principle that we're going to take a look at, and it's Newton's third law. That's primarily it, right? So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and this is huge in swimming because we don't have a real well-defined or stable point of contact, right? So we can get away with some excess movement while we're riding or while we're running because we have points of contact. When you don't have that, like in the water, if you have one hip that swings out to the right, what's going to happen when it comes back through? Swinging to the left, back to the right, back to the left, right? Now you have that rocking or the swaying motion of your hips, right? That's why this is so prevalent in swimming, right? So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the question that you guys need to ask yourself, what direction do I want the energy and the forces to go, right? Where do I want them? What do I want them to do? Where do I want them to go? And that answer is, I want it to go in the direction that is going to move my body forward, right? So what that means is we get into that big catch, high elbow position that we've talked about. You're feeling the pressure in the right spot. When we fire that backwards, we want that going straight back. We don't want it going out to the outside and back around and then kind of coming in. We don't want it coming underneath us or anything like that. Get into the catch position, feel the pressure, fire that thing straight backwards. If your thumb is kind of whacking off the side of your hip, off your quad, you're pretty good, right? That's a good general guideline right there. So what are some things that can really kind of mess up the direction of what we're trying to do under the water? Hand position during the pull, that's a huge one, right? So those of you that have heard of the S-curve swim stroke, I'm going to try to designate what this is with the mouse, so if you guys can see the mouse right here. If, let's say, this line where the picture in the white is going to be firing it straight backwards, right? So the hand entry, let's say, is right here, up at the top of the picture, and then the rest of the body, in line. The S curve starts with a very small movement of your hand to the outside, and then it's basically trying to get you to feel and scoop the water, and then that's brought back in, and then back online, straight down the side of your hip, right? If you can master that, it works incredibly well. If you can't master that, now you have this hand coming way out here, which now it has to sweep way back in. It's going to throw off your timing. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction type of thing. So the S curve, if you're learning how to swim, or if you know how to swim but you're just not going anywhere, the S curve is something to take a look at, but very cautiously, because it's going to help you feel the water. It's going to help you feel what's going on in the front quadrant. If you're an experienced swimmer and you want to start messing around with the S curve, you better be in the pool a lot, because if that gets off just a little bit, now we're introducing a whole slew of things into the equation that are probably going to create issues for us, right? So another one, fingers pointing in or out, right? So we want the hand more or less entering with the pointer finger, hitting the water first. If our hand is turned where our thumb is straight down, the only real action that we can make, if it's not to get my hand back to parallel, which if that's the goal, start that way, right? But if for whatever reason you're entering with your thumb straight down, the only real option you have is out to the side to get back on top of it, right? You start that out to the side thing, now you're creating delays and all kinds of problems through the swim stroke. Conversely, if you're entering with your hand with your pinky down, right, that enters in, now you're pretty much going to have to come to the inside to try to get back on top of it, right? And we want everything going in the direction we want it to go, right? So hand entry into the water, right? Are we entering with our hands coming right up on the midline, right? That's a very common thing to see. Or are we swimming like we got two railroad tracks down our shoulders, right? And our hands are staying on the railroad tracks, right? What direction do you want it, right? So how's the easiest way to see this, right? How can I determine what direction am I doing? What direction am I pulling in? How's the pressure looking? Am I athletically taut? Am I stacked? How am I going to look at all of this? Invest in a snorkel, a swimmer snorkel, not the I'm going to go scuba diving snorkel, the swimmer snorkel, right? What it basically is going to do is it's going to prevent you from having to rotate your body and your head to take a breath, and it's going to let you focus on actually swimming, right? 90% of the problems that people have with swimming, with their mechanics, are created when they take a breath, right? So that's using the snorkel is really going to help you remove that from the equation, let you work on the swim stroke. You can slow down the swim stroke enough that you can even see exactly what you're doing while you're swimming, all right? So a few drills for you guys to keep in mind. It'll help you work with what we're talking about and, just in general, get faster and be more efficient. First one is a snorkel, right? So if you guys don't know where to get a snorkel from, shoot me an email after this. I'll put you in the right direction. Second one, tennis balls, right? So everybody's, I'm assuming at some point, has heard of the closed fist drill, right? So you close both your fists, you swim like that, right? Even better than that, put a tennis ball in each hand, right? That's going to be an outstanding drill. If you don't have a good catch, if you don't have pressure in the right places, you're not going to go anywhere with the tennis balls while you're swimming. All right, it's can be very frustrating, but it's going to help you. Right. Third one, learn some other swim strokes. Right. A lot of this has to do with being aware of what your body's doing in the water. Right. When you're standing on the ground, you're well aware of where your body's at. Right. Everybody has pretty decent proprioception when they're standing on the ground, riding a bicycle, running, whatever it is. Right. But the problem is when you get into the pool, you're losing 85% of your body weight. Right? So if you're a 200-pound guy who's doing Ironman, you just lost 85% of your body weight. You now weigh the equivalent of 30 pounds in the water. Right? So what does that matter? Who cares, right? Let me ask you this. If I had you guys, if we all went out to the track and I said, all right, we're running a 400 for time. Whoever has the fastest 400, you're winning $1 million. Right? So now everybody's going to be hauling rear end. They run the fastest 400 they can, right? So we run the 400, everybody gets back in, and I'm like, all right, cool, check this out. Here's my magic wand, and I whack each of you on the head with it, and you now magically weigh 15% of what you weigh right now, right? So that 200-pound guy now weighs 30 pounds, and I say, all right, here's the deal. If you can run within 5 seconds of the time you just ran, I'll give all of you the $1 million. I'm pretty sure I can make that bet any day of the week, and I'm never going to lose any money. Because the reason being, when you lose 85% of your body weight, it is just very different. You don't have the same control. You don't have the same movement patterns. You don't have the same recruitment patterns. That's the problem with swimming. That's what we're going to really run into there. When we get into the water, we lose the body weight. We don't have a very well-defined and sturdy point of contact that we can use on a regular basis for swimming like we do in running or cycling. Right? So a couple other drills, rollover drill, all that simply is your hand enters into the water, you extend all the way out and just simply roll onto your back and then back around onto your front, right? That's the rollover drill. Swim golf, really good drill, really kind of fun to play, makes it a little more entertaining. All it is, you're going to swim a 50, right? 50 yards, 50 meters, doesn't matter. You need to count your swim strokes. Every time any hand enters the water, that counts as a swim stroke. And you add that to the time in seconds that it took you to swim the 50, right? So if you swim 50 yards in 40 seconds and you take 20 swim strokes, your golf score is 60, right? Now that would be 10 swim strokes per length. Is anybody really doing that? Nah, not unless you're Michael Phelps, all right? So what are we looking at more realistic for triathletes? If you're 80 or less on the swim golf, you're doing pretty good, right? If you're way above 80, means you're very inefficient. If you're way under 80, means you're really efficient, right? So check that out. Take a look at it. Your best bet, do it in sets of 4. First 50 is just nice regular swimming, what you feel is race pace. The second one is going to be swim like Jaws is chasing you, as fast as humanly possible. Third one, swim as much distance per stroke as you can get, right? Then the fourth one, put whichever one of those back in that you want. Take a look at the numbers, see what happens. All right, so that's going to sum up the swimming mechanics portion of this. So we're going to open it up to questions real quick before we do that. The next study hall call is still going to be open to the public next Tuesday, the 18th, same time, same station. There's your registration link. Give me till tomorrow afternoon to get the new one up, or else you're going to register for today's, which isn't going to get you very far. And then again, the membership program, any of you want to try that out, 2-week free trial, the discount code MPRO-2-weeks. There's the URL. So, all right, guys, let's see what questions we have and then open it up. All right. We got a question from Lisa. Lisa, I'm going to bring you on to ask this question. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
How are you? I'm good. How are you this evening?
I'm great, thank you.
Awesome. What's your question?
Okay, so my question is regarding optimal hand entry. I have always been taught to enter at the goggle line and then to extend, because it will eliminate a large portion of the water or of the pressure that I'll need to exert, if that makes sense, rather than coming in at a reach. Coming in at the goggle line and then extending? I'm not sure, so I'm asking you, what would you say is optimal hand entry position?
Okay, good question. I would say that the best mental cue for that is pretend that you have railroad tracks that your shoulders basically are sitting on, and our hand entry needs to be on that railroad track, right? So the way I look at this is, if we can make this simple, if we can make it easy to do and easy to understand, we're going to have more success, right? So what you're describing to me is my hand's going to enter somewhere around the midline, right? Somewhere around my nose, hopefully not right in front of my nose, right? But somewhere out in the middle. What you ultimately have to do in order to execute a good swim stroke is go from having your hand somewhere near the midline to back out where the railroad track is. And if you don't get it there before you initiate the pull, you're going to be sending your arm and all that pressure that we talk about in a direction that is not straight backwards, right? So my solution to that is have your hand enter on line where you want it to enter, right? And when it comes to how far out, I want you to reach as far out as you can without overextending, right? Because if your hand is entering and it's extended way out in front of you and it's on the railroad tracks, enters in, comes down, falls into that good catch position, you're right where we want to be. Right. So my question to somebody who says, well, no, you really want the hand to enter near the goggle line because it's doing whatever it is. My first question to them is, where do you want their hand to get before they start the pull? Right. And when they show me that, my question is going to be, why don't we just go there in the first place? Right. So that's a hard question to answer. So what do you think?
I think that makes sense, actually, what you're saying.
Okay, good.
I think it's just a matter of where you're extending your arm, out of the water or under the water. Does that make sense? So if I'm coming to the goggle line, I'm extending my arm while it's under the water.
Yes, but you have to extend it from your hand being in front of your face to now being in front of your shoulder, right? So remember, your hand is entering the water, right? And you are extending, right? That's where the majority of the extension is going to take place in this scenario, right? But as it's coming down into the water, if it's not already dropping where my hand is lower than my wrist lower than my elbow lower than my shoulder, if it's not already doing that, now I'm going to say you got way too slow of a swim stroke, right? But let's say that we get fully extended, right, and then drop into the catch position. If you don't get it fully extended and in line with your shoulder where those railroad tracks would be, when you initiate the catch, or I'm sorry, the pull, right? You're going to feel the pressure and generate force in the right direction, right? If your hand is still in the midline, your hand has to come from inside to outside just to get back in line, right? And if your timing is off at all, that's going to create problems in that. And ultimately, problems that get created that are very small like that start trickling their way through the entire swim stroke and start creating other larger problems. That make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right, awesome. Thank you for
Yeah.
coming on, Lisa. If you have more questions, type them in there. All right, guys, let's go to the next one. All right, Vincent, I'm going to bring you on up in Canada. Hey, Vincent, how are you tonight?
Pretty good yourself.
Not too shabby, man. What's your question?
So I swim with a lot of real swimmers, and they're some specific kind of people, and I'm always wondering what is the main difference that we as triathletes should focus on in terms of technique versus those master swimmers.
Um, that's a great question. And the first thing I would say is it's going to depend on the swim coach, the master swim coach, right? It depends on what they're teaching. But in general, the main differences between pool swimming and open water swimming, in a pool, especially in competition, you have your own lane. If it's a high enough level competition, the lanes on either side of the pool are empty, so it's not preventing it's preventing backsplash and any of this funky stuff. And you're swimming in perfectly clean water, and all you have to do is follow that black line and execute your swim race plan, and poof, you're done. When we get out into open water, whether it's a sprint, an Olympic, whether it's a draft legal event where we're doing a running entry or a dive start off of a dock, or whether it's Ironman where you're hopping in with 2,000 of your closest friends, right? You don't have a whole lot of clean water, and there isn't a lane line to follow, right? So now you are having to deal with more turbulence in the water, and you're having to deal with other athletes, right? So what I would say, the two or three biggest things off the top of my head for what's the biggest differences, you have to accept the fact that you're gonna get hit while you're swimming. You're gonna get kicked. You're gonna get elbowed. You're gonna get kneed. Whatever it is, that's gonna happen, right? That never happens in the pool unless something really weird is going on, which might make the Olympics a little bit more entertaining. That might be a new event to add in. But that's the first thing. Second thing, you have to accept the fact that the water is not going to be clean, right? And if you're depending on the body of water, you might have waves come in, you might have chop, you might have the surf coming in, whatever it is that you have to contend with. And a lot of the pool swimming technique that is being taught out there has to do with let's get really long, let's have a lot of rotation up on our side, and they use the really nice analogy of, hey, if you're a motorboat, that really fast speedboat that we're talking about, right? That's long. Yep, absolutely. They aren't, like a barge down in the water, right? They're up on the top of the water, right? That's the total immersions theory of get up on your side, right? You have a lower profile. You're like a racing yacht instead of a barge, right? But the problem becomes the more rotation you start adding into this equation, and the longer and slower that your stroke rate is, or stroke being longer, stroke rate being slower, you're really opening yourself up to the mercy of the people around you and to not having clean water, right? So how many times everybody in here is, I'm assuming, done a triathlon, right? So you've been out in the open water, you take a swim stroke, your head comes up out of the water to breathe, and wham, big giant wave or amount of water smashes you right in the face. You're like, yep, not getting a breath on that one, right? And if you have this really long, slow swim stroke that's really nice rotation, really long, right? There's not a lot you can do to recover from that other than you hope you can hold your breath long enough to rotate back to the other side to get out and get a breath, or else you're going to have to pop up and be like, all right, doggy paddle so I can catch my breath, right? So those would be the two biggest things. And then the third one, how do you kind of combat that? If we're talking about rotation, right? Mainly you were going to judge that with the hips, okay? So if a swimmer is perfectly flat on the top of the water, right, and we're going to draw a 90-degree angle, right, so straight up perpendicular to the water. Total immersions in general, and a lot of the other swim coaches that are out there teaching some stuff, they are a huge fan of the rotation, and they want you at a bare minimum of rotating to 45 degrees, if not more. And when you do that, you're giving up a tremendous amount of flexibility. You're ultimately really not helping yourself in the open water. It's going to take you longer to react. So my solution to that, a lot of the top swim coaches out there in triathlon that, I've had these discussions with, and, just what I'm seeing with athletes I've worked with professional athletes that I know, their hip rotation, if it even hits 30 degrees, that's a lot, right? And what that basically means, faster turnover, right? Because they don't have this big, slow rotation type based swim stroke. They have a faster turnover, and should they get hit with another body, with an arm, with a leg, with a wave, whatever it is, they are moving at a faster rate, meaning cycling through the swim stroke faster. They're going to be more able to react to something that pops up. Does that kind of make sense?
It does.
Awesome, awesome. So now let me throw one more thing in there just so I don't inadvertently confuse the heck out of everybody. So there does become a point at which your stroke rate is too fast. All right. So that's where the swim golf ties in. Do the normal swim, do race pace, do one like Jaws is chasing you, and do one for, as long of a swim stroke as you can get. Take a look at the numbers, see where you're more efficient, right? The lower the golf number, the more efficient you are. So, all right, Vincent, thanks for coming on with the question, man. If you have any more, type them in.
Sure thing.
All right, let's go on to the next question. Any more questions you guys have, type them in. We've still got time. We got about 15 minutes left or so. So, okay, great question by Matt. Matt asks, should my fingers be open or closed when I am going to initiate the pull? And that's a great question, Matt. The best answer that I have for you with that is slightly open. All right, you don't want them spread like you're, trying to spread your fingers out as far as you can. There's just too much space there for water to get between your fingers. You don't want it perfectly closed because now you're minimizing the paddle. And when we take a look at water and some hydrostatic forces, ultimately, if we have a little bit of a gap, like if you just put your hand out in front of you and just let it sit there in its normal position, the hydrostatic forces, the water's not going to really get between the fingers, right? You're actually creating a slightly larger paddle. So that's what I would tell you, Matt. Not super spread out, not super close together, just something that's natural, quite frankly. So great question. Great question. All right, guys, what other questions do we got? Anything you want to ask about? Can be swimming, can be biking, can be running, can be pacing, some nutrition, some electrolytes, hydration, cramping. You guys name it. What do you want to know? This is your guys' opportunity to ask whatever questions you want. All right, Matt, I'm going to bring you on for this one. That's a good question. Hey, Matt, are you there?
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, how are you tonight?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, good, good. I'm doing well. All right, man, what's your question? This is a good one.
All right. So when I was swimming yesterday, I started to realize how I exhale and should I be holding my breath, blowing out as I come up to the surface and then sucking in air, or exhaling in the water and then breathing as I turn my head? Make sense?
Yes, outstanding question. So what you're going to want to do is ultimately what is referred to as blowing bubbles. All right, so once your head comes back into the water from having taken a breath, you're going to just slowly start exhaling and blowing bubbles out your mouth, right? Because the goal is when we're going to get ready to execute another rotation so we can take a breath, we want our lungs empty, right? Or relatively empty, right? So what we don't want is as soon as our head gets out of the water, we have to rapidly exhale and then try to rapidly get a breath back in, get my face back down in the water, all in the amount of time that it takes for my hand to exit the water to get up to roughly where my face is, right? So one of the biggest culprit in swimming technique is occurring when people go to take a breath, right? And that's because they're taking their head too far out of the water, their head is taking too long to get a breath. Those are the two biggest ones, right? So you're going to blow bubbles as you're swimming, nice and steady rate, and your lungs are going to be mostly emptied by the time you're ready to rotate, get your head up out of the water, to get your breath, get your face back into the water. That make sense?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Awesome. You're welcome, Matt. All right, man. All right, we got one for, we're going to bring Lisa back in. Lisa always has some good questions. All right, Lisa, give it to me.
All right. Well, I kind of have a love affair with my pull buoy, and I've been told I use it as a crutch. Should I be using it? Should I not be using it? Or when should I be using it? My feeling is that I use the wetsuit during a race. Oh, I've never raced without a wetsuit, and that gives me buoyancy, and I can't kick with a wetsuit. So the buoy simulates that. So in my mind, I'm saving my legs for the swim and for the bike and the run. Am I totally off base?
No, no, I don't think you're totally off base. I think that your comment about, I'm wearing a wetsuit, it's going to bring my body and my hips up to the surface, and in a wetsuit, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do to kick, right? And that's absolutely true. When it comes to when to use it in a pool and when not to, right? So I'm a fan of the pull buoy, right? You and I've had this discussion. Roberta and I've had this discussion. And it ultimately, if you're taking the kicking out of the swim stroke, you're going to really everything that's happening is due to the upper body, obviously. So you're going to really build some swim specific strength there, and that's a positive thing. Brett Sutton's a huge fan of paddles, pull, swim, swim with the pull buoy, swim with paddles, that type of thing, and it builds a tremendous amount of strength, right? And that's a good thing. What I would tell you to be cautious with the pull buoy is you do have to get some time swimming without a pull buoy, right? Because ultimately, if you're not, you're neglecting the entire back half of the swim stroke, right? Everything from what you're doing with the kick, right? And the entire purpose of the kick for triathletes, for the most part, non-super competitive triathletes, it provides balance and it provides stability while we're swimming, right? That's the entire purpose of the kick. We're going to start getting more competitive. Now we're getting a little bit of propulsion added in with it, okay? So I would say for being well-rounded and well-developed as a swimmer and as an athlete, you definitely want to get some time without the pull buoy. The biggest thing to take into account is you got to pay very close attention to what your shoulders are doing. If your shoulders are screaming at you, if you have bad shoulders, shoulder injury, swimming with the pull buoy with or without the paddles does increase the load on your shoulders. So that's something that you really got to be careful with. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I've been consciously swimming all my warm-ups and cool-downs without the pull buoy and trying to do some of the speed work without it as well. But I still love it.
Good, good. As long as it's not hurting your shoulders, I don't know that we have a really major problem.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. All right, guys, we've got a few minutes left. Who hasn't asked a question yet? Jerry, Mitch, Pat, Bill. Give me a question, guys and gals. Whatever's on your mind, throw it in there. This is your guys' opportunity to ask whatever it is you want to ask. It can be about swim stroke, can be about running, can be about cycling, power meter, running with a Garmin watch, race day nutrition, what not to do in transition. Questions, questions. Anybody? All right, guys, if we don't have any more questions, I think we'll come to an end a little bit early this evening. Any questions? There's a question. All right. Outstanding. All right, Pat and or Bill, I'm going to bring you on for this question. Hello, Pat and Bill.
Yeah,
How are you guys?
we're good.
Outstanding. What's your question? It's a good one that you typed in.
Well, I'm looking at the difference between a full wetsuit and a sleeveless with neoprene sleeves. Do you know anything about the difference between the effect of the two?
The neoprene sleeves being not buoyant. What's that?
I'm looking at the fact that a full wetsuit causes shoulder problems, so solving that by using the sleeveless with neoprene sleeves for warmth.
Okay, gotcha. I agree 100% with you. Swimming with the full wetsuit is definitely more taxing on the shoulders. It modifies the swim stroke a little bit, right? Because you don't have, without making a conscious decision to kick, your kick rate is going to be less. It's going to drop down to probably a 2 beat kick. And that really can start trickling its way. That's just different than what you're used to training with, unless you're always swimming in a wetsuit. So, what I would tell you is, if it's creating shoulder issues, if it's just making you unhappy because of the shoulders and having the full wetsuit, by all means go with the sleeveless one. I like the idea of putting like a neoprene swim shirt or sleeves or something to that effect on underneath it. I think that's a great idea, especially for warmth. I would say, I would invest, if you're going to go that route, invest a decent amount of money in that neoprene swim top, right? Because you always get what you pay for, right? So if you get the 1995 special, that'll probably keep you warm down to 70 degrees or so, right? But if you get the 49.95 or the 99.99 one or whatever it is, it's probably going to keep you warmer, right? So I know Lake Tahoe isn't always the warmest lake in the world, and I know that Ironman Arizona, which you guys have done in the past, tends to be a little on the chilly side. So I don't see any issues with that. Personally, if I ever did another triathlon, the water would have to be, well under 65 before I would consider using, a full sleeved wetsuit. And that's just because I have shoulder issues anyways, but I don't like swimming in a wetsuit, like with what you said, that, it's creating issues with the shoulders. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep. And have you heard that the sleeves are legal, right?
From the swim top?
No, just they have just the swim sleeves. They are legal.
I'm not 100% sure.
I've heard it both ways. Sure. I've seen people wearing them, and I've also heard someone say they're not legal for Ironman.
Yeah, I would shoot an email over to Ironman and ask them. That's going to obviously be the best, most accurate answer. I think that if it were me, and it's cold enough that the water's cold enough that I'm going to want sleeves underneath the sleeves with a sleeveless wetsuit, I'm probably not going to object to having a full thermal swim top on. Right. And I know that, a lot of you skinny people out there, or as people get older, maintaining and keeping core body temperature in the swim can become challenging, especially that's challenging for anybody, quite frankly. But as the leaner you are, or as you get older, or for really young athletes, having that extra insulation, I don't think that's going to be an issue either. So I would email Ironman, see what they have to say about it. If they can't give you a definitive yes, this is legal, then I would take a look at the swim top. They can't, I guess they could look at you and be like, take that off. We need to do the buoyancy test to it. But in all honesty, there's 2,000, 3,000 people getting into the water. I would be utterly shocked if they were like, hey, you with the sleeves, come here and let's look at those type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, all right. Thank you, Pat. Great question. All right. We got a couple more. Read this one. Wow. Jerry, great question. Let me bring you in for this, man. Jerry, you there?
Yes.
All right. How are you tonight?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Not too shabby. Not too shabby. So, all right, give everybody this question. This is a really good question. I'm pretty sure that I'm 100% sure you're not the only one dealing with this.
I have a really serious problem with, I guess it's technically called swallowing air. Like even after a mile, I'm really bloated, like stomach cramps. So it's bad enough when I'm in the water, but then I get off and get on the bike, and it's impossible to ingest any food or nutrition for a while to get the problem taken care of. So I guess my question is suggestions on breathing technique to stop this or at least lessen it to where it's more comfortable.
Yeah, no, great question. Great question. All right, so here would be the two things I would tell you and kind of have you go out and test the next time you go to the pool and swim. My guess is you're not exhaling enough air while your face is in the water, right? So do you blow bubbles? Do you know if you blow bubbles or whether you're holding your breath?
Yes, I do. I've recently learned to blow bubbles. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a lot of
Um,
problems also with my sinuses. My
okay.
sinuses get stopped up in the water. If I ingest any water into my sinuses, they just swell up.
Hmm. Okay.
So then
Nose
at
plug.
times, it used to be I used to wear a nose clip and
Hmm.
strictly breathe in and out of my mouth.
Hmm.
And then I was taught to nose breathe to cut down on this problem, but it's still not helping.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, having sinus issues, I think can very quickly outrank having GI issues, right? So I think I would go back to the clip if that's going to be a real issue that you're going to have to face on a regular basis, but get that nose
Okay.
clip back on, right? The
All
last
right.
thing you want is the sinus is turning into a mess and you have 112 miles to ride and a marathon to run. That's obviously something we don't want. What I would say is, when you head to the pool next, focus on trying to get your lungs a little more empty, get rid of a little more of the air underwater, so blowing the bubbles and just blow them out your mouth. It's ideally you'll blow them out your nose, but with a nose clip, guess what? Air exits your mouth just fine. It's not a problem, right? So
Okay.
make sure you're getting a little, not maybe when you first start it, completely empty to where you're like, oh God, I need a breath type of thing, right? And what
All
we're
right.
trying to do when you're doing this, we're going to chop up the swim stroke. It's going to look terrible, but we're trying to solve a bigger issue, right? So, get the lungs completely emptied. And then when you rotate to take that breath, take just a little bit longer so that you're not gulping the air, that you're sucking it in. Okay. And I know that when I first really got into triathlon, got out of the army and started swimming in a pool, it was pretty funny to watch, I would imagine. But I had some very similar stuff to where I'd get done with a swim workout and I was gassy for like 30 minutes. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And it's somebody had told me once, they're like, just be a little slower with the rate at which you're sucking the oxygen in. That make sense?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, give that a try. And then if it works, shoot me an email. Let me know. If it doesn't work, shoot me an email. Let me know. We'll try something else.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. All right. We got one more question from Lisa. I'm just going to read this one. Should we consciously be thinking about the kick? Great question, Lisa. In the pool, yes. That's going to make you a more well-rounded swimmer. It's going to help with the technique. It's going to ultimately make you better and more efficient. When it comes to racing, if your goal, coming, next year around as we keep working on this, if the goal is, hey, I want to go to nationals, want to go to worlds, that type of thing, then we need every little thing we can do to stack the deck in our favor. But at this point, what I tell you right now you got the Olympic race coming up here in September, right? Which is more of like you racing Roberta type of a thing. But one I would say, just as long as your body position is good and you're kicking enough to maintain the balance, I think you're going to be good. That's something that you absolutely can do. Focus more on the kicking, right? And it's something that for me in particular, way back when I was racing, I had to actively think about it to kick, or else I'm two beat kick, and it was all front quadrant swimming basically. So I would say that's something that you can definitely do. You can do it in training, and get it to a point where it makes sense for you to kick in the pool. Because like you had said earlier when I had you on with one of the earlier questions, I want to get through the swim without burning up my legs, right? And when you have a wetsuit on and you're kicking like crazy and the wetsuit and the neoprene is restricting your hip mobility and your ability to kick, it's making it more difficult. That's a similar fashion to what Pat had asked about the shoulders with the wetsuit, right? If you're burning up your hips and you're kicking like crazy and you go from, let's say, a 28-minute Olympic swim to a 27:42, does that really make a difference in the grand scheme of things? Right now, if you're racing to be very competitive and you're wanting to be on the podium, you're wanting to qualify for a national or a world championship event, then yeah, that might be something to look at, right? If your goal is, hey, I want to finish the race, right, then the kicking isn't that important. right? And especially as you get up to, a half Ironman, but eat way more so with the full Ironman, spending a whole lot of time kicking and a whole lot of energy kicking is energy that you're spending that could be spent on the bike or the run, especially when it's kicking. So, all right, I hope that answers your question, Lisa. So, all right, guys, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for coming on to the call. Remember, next week, same time, same station. Give me till tomorrow afternoon to make sure that link is up and running. And thanks, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. Had a great time tonight.